Well, good afternoon. Barb said to me that normally at Ease's she has 60, 65 people. I think I've been hornswoggled a little bit. Okay. Also, just to let you know, I just recently accepted a new position. You've all heard about my supreme engagement skills with clientele and ability to communicate. So I'm now an employee of United. They had an opening. So I would like to introduce two additional members of the board who are here. First off, my vice chairman, Steve Plummer. And the other is Lauren Lloyd. Now, Lauren can only stay for an hour afterwards, or sorry, an hour, and then she has to leave. After this meeting today, I'm more than willing to stay for individual discussions if you don't want to ask questions. There will be a Q&A at the end. But I will be happy to stay around at least for a while until starvation or whatever falls into place. Lauren is the chair of the Finance Committee. Clean audit, no comments. Just got that report on Tuesday. Absolutely well done, well done. The auditors were effusive with the praise for the financial team led by Lauren and Hardy. Now, I do take that with a grain of salt. Just means I haven't figured out yet which bank in the Cayman Islands Hardy has his personal retirement fund established at, so I know it's there somewhere. So Hardy, we're watching. I just want to state up front, I know that everybody cares about Falcons Landing. That's why you're here. That's why, and I acknowledge the people that are, I think on CCTV. Is that CCTV? So we have people watching the room, so I'd like to welcome you, and the large group here. So everybody cares, and I really don't want to have that come across to anybody that anything or comments that have occurred, it's not because people don't care, okay? And we have to keep that in mind throughout. People care, which is why they're passionate, and to be frank, if people weren't passionate about it, I'd be a lot more worried about the community. If people said, okay, well, do what you want, or whatever it is, that'd be a lot more concerning to me. The people are passionate and caring is very important, and I think is very valuable to the community. We may have differences of opinion, but everybody cares. The board only has one charge. That's the success of Falcon Landing. It's a give back for the board members, and no board member has any financial interest in any course of action that we select. Now, I got to qualify that a little bit. Since 1984, Hardy has given each board member $10 to attend a board meeting to be able to defray gas expenses. I've been thinking about asking for a raise, but so far Hardy has said no. This is not a puppy board. And by that I mean the people we bring on did not get to their position in life and on the board because they're timid or not willing to speak up or not willing to say anything. So I just want to assure you of that it's not me making all the decisions. It's not the CEO deciding what the board is going to do. The board as a body is a forceful presence, and we've recruited board members who act that way. And so I want you to have confidence in that. Now, at one point in my Navy career, I was a detailer. Now, Navy people in the room are horrified. Detailer as chairman of the board. Now, other services have equivalent names for those kind of reprehensible individuals. The Marines are monitors, Army and Air Force assignment officers, and in fact, when I was asking some of those Army and Air Force, they said there's many other names, but you can't use those in public. So when you become a detailer, you get a choice. Either split your tongue so you can talk out of both sides of your mouth, or you can get a lobotomy so you actually believe what you say. So I'm here to tell the Falcons Landing residents, I chose the lobotomy. So I'm here to tell you what I really believe, okay? It is not a song and dance in any way, shape, or form. And I will answer you truthfully to the best of my ability. Now, one of the things I want to bring up, because it'd probably be question number one in the Q&A, and I'll bring it up right now, about cancellation of the annual meeting. It's our premier marketing event. It takes considerable time, effort, and funding, your funding, to put it together, and it's attended by a large number of people external to the community. There are several issues that gave the board pause about the annual meeting. There was probably an unfortunate choice of words, among other things, and like you, we doubt that anyone was interested in a discussion at the annual meeting to be at the detriment of the community. Because we already said, everybody is for the community. And for the board, it was all about risk. It was unfortunate timing that the annual meeting would have occurred only 3 days prior to the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors meeting, which meant that even with the best of intentions, the meeting ran a real risk of allowing passions, interest, and whatever to allow us not to put our best foot forward, especially to those outside the community, and be very public in our discussions. That doesn't mean I'm saying we can't have an alternative views or discussions. I'm saying those ought to be private, in-house, and we ought to talk about it, which is why I'm here today. But having a very public type of aspect is something that I really didn't want to have potential future, while it's still an open area discussion, and it's only 3 days before the Board of Supervisors meeting. Another point that was considered, I don't know how many of you saw this article in the Loudoun Now paper labeled Falcons Landing Demolition Plan Splits Veterans Community. A very public piece. What was really concerning the board was the comment at the bottom from a reader. Let me read this out to you. Maybe it's time for the supervisors to revoke AFROC's property tax exemption. Few realize, but these wealthy Air Force retirees pay no property taxes to the county due to some sweetheart deal made in the days when good old boys ran the county. Why should they be exempt from the taxes when they pay taxes at other retirement communities? That's the kind of thing where if we have passionate discussion in a large open forum, that we run the risk of being very visible and garner additional comments like that. And because of that, the board really didn't want to do that, so that's why we canceled the annual meeting. We felt it was very important not to try to appear to be sweeping anything under the rug. And that's why the 2 letters we sent, the internal letter to the residents stating a reason, and then the external letter we had, which talked about a little bit of turmoil going on just before the Board of Supervisors meeting. And because we didn't want to appear to be trying to be hiding any discontent or approach with our approach. I want to read to you we got an email from somebody, and it said, I read the attached letter with interest. My father would greatly benefit from memory care facility, and our family supports the construction. Here's the key thing. I appreciate the openness with which the letter was written to the Falcons Landing community and understand completely the need to focus on internal communication at this time. So that just highlights the board's concern when we sent those letters out, that we just didn't say, oh, we're canceling it, we're going to talk internally. No, we didn't want to appear to be trying to downplay it to such a degree that people outside the community would go, huh, what are they trying to do? We wanted to be very open about it. Communication. As I have said to several of you, the board was surprised you were surprised. We thought there was steady communication through a number of mechanisms, meetings, etc. Since the last large group meeting in July and August of last year, and to Gene Hilsman, just thanks for asking, and yes, the scars have healed very nicely. We have tried to improve more robust committee assignments, briefings, several letters and notes to you all, such as Q&A, including one summary of an email exchange between myself and George Stieg. And thanks, George, for letting me mention your name. We may not always agree, but I want to be well understood. Also, Dave Belden asked me to mention that he has changed his contact number from 1-800 to Dave Belden to this new number, 1-800 Margaret Quayle. Now, the master plan has been in the works since 2007, various iterations. At one point, we had a new apartment building once considered that would have been, we once considered that would have removed several homes. So the board really didn't think it was that emotive an impact when we made a different approach with a similar effect. And we acknowledge we were wrong. The fact that Falcons Landing has ongoing improvements planned is a strong selling point. Good example, the private dining room renovation. I'm truly impressed. Marine dinner earlier this week. What's the core assessment? Good? Okay, well, I don't want to hear from the Marines. I mean, you guys be happy in a foxhole. I want to know what the spouses think. What do the spouses think? Good? Okay, I would like to I would suggest a round of applause to the management team for doing all this work in-house. I was truly impressed. And I hope all our changes will be successful. It's a prime example, I think, of where one individual who came to Falcons Landing, who was on the board of another life community, chose here instead. Now, when we talk about the master plan, it may be misleading. I mean, when you think about it and sort of the emotive impact of it is, it implies the plan is firm, and if we decide to move forward, we will start at phase 1 and continuously munch all the way through. I mean, that's kind of how a master plan sounds, right? That's not necessarily the case. Approval of our proposal merely gives us the county's permission to proceed with any part of our plan, all of the plan, or none of the plan. We can start whenever we choose and do so and stop after phase 1 or phase whatever. If we decide that is all we want to do, well, we can proceed to the next one. When we talked about it as a 20-year plan, that's a notional time frame if we choose to complete all 4 phases as drawn in our submission to the county. Over time, we may want to do something a little different that we can make an adjustments within the limits of what the county approves. What would approval by the Board of Supervisors mean? Mainly the start of detailed assessments, design considerations, layouts, appearance of memory care, terrace homes, engaging residents, and more. I mean, I met with the potential phase 1 residents on Tuesday, and we had a very open and frank discussion. And I wanted to make sure that they had because sometimes when you talk about it at the board or an organization, it's sort of this faceless group of people. Well, I wanted to make sure they had direct engagement with me face to face so that they could put a name with a face. And I said, we recorded our conversations. At least one resident did as well, so that we'd have that and we could point to it later or review it later but you said. So I wanted to make sure that it was formally recorded and we were able to do that. And I think from some exchanges I've had with the residents that attended, I'm not necessarily saying everybody agreed or I converted or anything like that. What I'm saying is I think most of them felt like I was being straightforward, honest, and willing to engage in discussion and allowed them to ask some questions. Now, one of the things that's going to happen is, besides, this financial assessments, loading facilities or loading on other facilities at Falcons Landing, parking, dining, staffing needs such as house cleaning, maintenance, wellness, health center, et cetera. All that goes into the analysis. Now, all that being said, if and this is what I told the Phase 1 residents, if every one of them said, hey, we'll do whatever you need to do to get out of your way, and you can start whenever you're ready, it would be the earliest, it'd be 18 months to 2 years before we stuck a shovel in the ground. That's at the very earliest. There's a lot of things that we have to assess in what's going on. Now, one of the things, I want to take off the table right now, is the contract. Life provision is going to be honored for current residents, where it talks in there about a specific type of place and a unit number. There will be no eviction notices. Leaving a home will only occur if the resident is willing and satisfied with any new accommodations. And that doesn't mean, I had one question that said, hey, well, okay, you're late in delivering an accommodation that I'm supposed to move to, and am I going to have to move to an apartment before, in the interim, and then move again? And I'm saying, this is all up to you. You're going to move when you agree to move, and no sooner. So I know that's a very emotive issue for a number of people, and I'm looking, where's Dwayne Stubbs? Was very passionate about that throughout all this. And I looked Wayne in the eye on Tuesday, and I said, that's absolutely my commitment to you and the other residents. Okay. Up front, I want to be up front about this though too. Contracts being signed today no longer have a unit number. They have a type of residence. And also, there is a master plan disclosure document that we provide for anybody entering in now. We don't, as somebody that I think is fairly practical, we've got a plan for the future, and we want people to be aware of what we have planned, and so it's up front from square one. But the individuals that are in their units today, it's their decision, their willingness to accept what's going on, and that kind of. We'll work individually with each residence. I'm not saying, hey, here's the blanket plan, and you're going to, we're working individually with each resident. And we haven't really started that because, all through this, we've been waiting till, is it even an option? If it doesn't get approved by the Board of Supervisors, what's the point of trying to make a detailed plan, moving plans? I mean, that's just upsetting and gets indefinite, et cetera. So that's why we really haven't been engaging with all those things, because we're taking it stepwise. Why expend the energy and effort if it never gets approved? But we'll move to as like as possible, upgrades to match to current if possible, a move coordinator at no cost to the resident. They must agree. Let me say that again. They must agree. Now, I've tried several times to tell Bill Maguth that I will not have a bulldozer on his front lawn waiting for him to make a trip to the food line. Okay? But Bill. So hopefully somebody else will be able to convince him. Memory house, more and more of an issue and a strong point for consideration. It's ironic, at the meeting on March 28th at the Planning Commission, they approved just the agenda item just before us. They approved a new continuing care retirement community, and one of the features they highlighted to the Planning Commission was a memory care unit. That was a brand new facility going in Loudoun County. Now, I will acknowledge, and I think you probably sense that as well, that there is a broader enthusiasm, if you want to use that word, for the memory house than the terrace homes that we've also proposed. And, we recognize that. Now, the memory house, we've got sort of conceptual drawings. We do not have detailed cost estimates. But the sizing of it is usually in multiples of 6 for efficient staffing. Now, but one thing that is clear is that it will not be self-funding. The revenue it brings in will not cover its additional cost. There is going to be a deficit that has to be made up somehow if we go forward. That's almost, in any way, shape, or form, that if we get any kind of acceptable unit. How much? We're still in that evaluation process. But but that's one of the factors which goes into our evaluation of what can we do, what's affordable, those kind of things. Now, the terrace homes, our residents today are designed in the 80s, early 90s, 25, 27 years ago. And people today are bringing people in. You've heard the story before about high ceilings, a lot of glass, multiple facets, not long corridors of those kind of things. From my point of view, it's providing options to other residents, to potential new residents. I want to address a topic which comes up repeatedly over the past year, which is the Morningside Terrace acquisition. That's 71 units, and if you look at the current, what they're on the market for, that'll be about $26.5 million to acquire those units over there. We did do a review and analysis. I was asked by it so much that I went to somebody that is a trustee on the board of George Washington University, because it's been said, hey, just follow a university business model for being able to do that. And so what they did is they put me in touch with their procurement, their operations department, and I asked them, who would you go to ask for? And they said, well, there's a firm that's got offices in downtown DC, and in fact, they've got offices in Loudoun County. And I said, well, who is that? I said, and they said, it's Walsh and Colucci. I said, interesting. That's our land use attorney that we're using today. So we have acknowledged experts in the field that I didn't say, hey, is this name, what do you think? That's the name they gave me. Now, from the major point which sticks with me, it would be an investment without certainty that it will be approved. Falcons Landing is measured, its primary financial metric is days cash on hand. Now, it takes approximately $65,000 a day to operate Falcons Landing for staff and all the things that go on. So that means $6.5 million is 100 days cash on hand. And that's from money that we're holding from entrance fees, investments, things that a bank would look at and say, yeah, I agree, that's cash. You could liquidate that and fund your expenses. The bank covenant is 120 days. If you go below that, they'll call our loans, they'll do everything like that. So you don't want to be anywhere near that. So we have right now about 325, and the average life community has about 370. So, and that number we have has been climbing somewhat because of all the renovations and the $5 million worth of improvements we made. We funded a lot of that internally. So we're in the cash recovery process, but I don't want to use the word below average because, like I said, our auditors were very impressed with our financial strength. But we can't go say we'll pay for the acquisitions with cash. We'd have to borrow. Homes are illiquid and not positive consideration by the financial institutions when they consider us for the metrics by which financial strength for which to borrow. If we bought them and they were for interim use, they would not be for use of Falcons Landing, of people that we're trying to bring into Falcons Landing. Those are exactly the type of places people are moving away from. Stairs, communities, and virtually no access to the rest of the amenities and facilities and conveniences that the residents inside the fence line here have. It's not an option for them to do that. Holdouts. let's say we got millions into this, and somebody goes, there's that large, you already heard it, affluent, rich Air Force people next door, that's a deep-pocketed organization. I'm sitting pretty, so I'm going to hold out. And be perfectly frank, if I was in their shoes, and if you were in their shoes, wouldn't you be doing the same thing? Okay? The rezoning request, or I keep getting corrected by our land use planner. The zoning change request would not be able to be submitted to Loudoun County until after we had all the properties acquired, under contract, or we had a written authorization by the current owner that says, yes, I agree that you can rezone the property, even though you don't own it. And what individual would do that? I can't think of any. I certainly wouldn't. Why lose leverage, right? So the question to the board would be, okay, what do you do if I put millions into it, years of time, and the county goes, no thanks. You know, we don't agree with disrupting a community that's established. We got residents there, and oh, by the way, those people in over Morningside pay about $300,000 in property taxes every year. So what's the county's reaction going to be if we say, we've acquired all these properties, we're going to bring that into the Falcons Landing umbrella, be part of our community, our nonprofit, untaxed community? What is the county going to ask for? They're going to ask for a pro-offer. They say, fine. They're going to say, but make us whole at $300,000. Also, I went and looked at a unit just the other day online, and saw a typical townhome over there, and it pays $71 a month in homeowner association fees. 71 units times $71 times 12 is about $60,000. So, is the homeowner association? We had a fairly vigorous, if you want to call it, planning commission meeting the other day. So what's the homeowners association position going to be about losing $60,000 worth of revenue to address their needs of snow plowing, maintenance, lawns, you name it? Even though they'd be losing responsibility for stuff to maintain, they wouldn't go quietly. So there's that. One suggestion that has come up is no Falcons Landing cash. Said, and and that sounds like a fantastic idea. That we don't have, that we generate income or we generate money to be able to buy those, but it doesn't come out of Falcons Landing coffers. And some people have said, hey, there's a number of institutions which do this already. But my question is for Falcons Landing, who are the target donors for this? Universities rely on alumni for 50 years after they graduate to donate to the school that helped make them successful. 50 years. And I'm not trying to be negative here, but there's not many Falcons Landing alumni. Okay. So $26 million to be generated, and let's say you're, okay, we'll do that. And let's say I could pry a check out of John Kinneborough for $10,000 to put towards this. And I know you're all thinking, good luck with that. But what will that one-time $10,000 donation get me? Probably about a month's time, salary, benefits, and some operating effort by an individual we hired as a director of development. A month's time. And then after that, he's going to go, okay, where's my next $10,000 to keep me going for 15 years? So, I've listened and I understand how attractive the idea would be for doing over there. But we've looked at it and we really think it is not very practical at all. And finally, I contacted the land use planner and over at the Walsh and Colucci, and I said, okay, I'm a developer. What's your assessment? And I said, please be frank. Because I'm not trying to get you to spin it, in the way I favor. I said, give me your assessment. And here's what he said: there's a large number of individually owned properties, stable area, not in decline. Now, I hadn't considered that before, but that was the key. That was a thing he keyed on a lot. Stable area, not in decline. Well maintained. People are not abandoning properties. There's normal turnover. No potential for eminent domain. I would advise any developer, don't waste your time. And this is from somebody who would get business from us if we went on this course of action. So his incentive would actually be to say, that might actually be in the art of the possible. He would be getting business from us. So he had no advantage in telling us to, don't even start. So, just to let you know, I've documented all this on a paper. If you want to read it, I can provide that. I'm not going to widely distribute it because, frankly, it's got some sensitive numbers about Falcons Landing because we're pretty frank on there. If you want to come read it, I'd ask to say come see Barb, but I'd ask you not to make copies because, frankly, I just don't want to share it around. But if you really do think it is, after I've talked here, it's a viable option, please come read it and just see how it's laid out. I mean, it really is a challenge. And the final thing I want to mention about this is management attention. Okay, how many here have had rental properties? Have had rental properties, owned them, you were away and you had rental properties out there, et cetera. Okay. I've had rental properties. I had two. I was not in one for 17 years, and when I saw it inside, I was amazed. But I would like to know, and I'll really be honest, I would really like to see any show of hands of anybody that's had, rental properties that have been, and you've had property manager, so you're not doing it yourself. But that has been very low maintenance. You had to pay very little attention to that property. You never got called about evictions. You never called about maintenance, roofs, siding. I'm just relaying the minor ones that I had. I remember going into one of the properties and and after evicting a young lady, and it was amazing. But so the contention that you can have a worry-free, attention-free management of those 40 homes that you've bought and you're trying to work your way to those 71 is I don't think plausible. And I'm telling you, the board does not want the CEO and the management team looking outside the gates. Want the CEO and the management team focusing on you and on Falcons Landing, not worrying about battling the homeowners association about property maintenance, about lawn care, and the mulching wasn't satisfactory. I mean, that's not what we want her to be doing. And I'm almost done. Debt and fiscal prudence. One assertion I heard at the Planning Commission meeting was that the monthly fees will go to $10,000 per month if the plan is approved. I've got no idea where that came from. It wouldn't pass muster with the board. We would only approve something that was reasonable, and that's all we've ever done. But doubling your monthly fees is not tenable in any way, shape, or form. Even though many people's views is, board, you're not looking out for current residents. You're only thinking about filling your coffers in the future, or filling it. That's not true. We're trying to do a balancing act, and we certainly believe, and I think, and I can't imagine that any resolution that Hardy, I'm trying to shift the blame here, that Hardy put forward that said, let's double the monthly fees for every resident would ever pass muster. That's not going to happen. And not 50% either. I mean, it's going to be, it has to be reasonable. Now, there's minimal resource, right now, today, we have done minimal resource expenditure on all this analysis. You know, the reason why you don't see outside before this meeting, detailed construction designs, detailed planning milestones, Whiting Turner there standing by to answer your questions, is we've done none of that. You know, we've got some concepts, we've got outlines, that's how we shaped our proposal, and I didn't want to spend one dime more of your money until I found out whether it was worth spending anything at all. If this doesn't get approved by the county, then we won't have wasted your money. And that, I think, would be the biggest sin, is if we did. So, very truthfully, we haven't spent a lot of money on detailed designs, bringing in the raising expectations of everybody. We're doing it stepwise, one piece at a time. Our primary goal is not to drive increased revenue, rather it's to maintain occupancy and maintain Falcons Landing as a premier facility. Now, I'm going to shift over to questions now, but I would ask that we have no more three-part Mick Trainer questions. Took me a half hour to answer those last time, and so I would ask that any questions be one question per person, and please wait till the microphone comes to you before you ask your question. Please. Questions? Hold up your hand up front.
I don't have.
It's on.
Did you turn it on? I don't have a question. I have a report. Bill Ryan and I just returned yesterday from our 65th Naval Academy class reunion, and you would expect that in that cohort, a lot of people would be living in continuing care communities. So I took it upon myself to talk to about 20 different classmates and their wives, and I was astonished to discover that everyone I talked to was delighted with where they are. They're sort of like us. They want to tell you we have our 6 dining rooms, we have our 12 tennis courts, we have our own lake. The conclusion clearly is the competition out there is pretty severe. And so I think everything we're doing to try and keep up with that demand is a good undertaking. That's not a question, just a report.
Okay, great. Thanks for your comment. I have a question or comment over here.
Thanks for coming out.
Absolutely.
And you know I've asked pointed questions before. This one's very simple. You indicated that we that are here today would have the option of approval before we're moved out or anything like that.
Right.
I know that started for folks prior to this year.
Mm-hmm.
Is something coming out to us to state that that's the case right now?
For what do you mean?
Some kind of a letter that says, okay, I'm here, I'm a resident today. And before I'm told that I will move, I will go through the process you explained earlier in the presentation. That I will be asked, that I won't move out or be moved out until I'm ready to move out, that I have to agree to whatever is being put forward.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you're asking me if are we going to, can we outline the process that we expect to take?
No, sir. No, sir. I'm not asking for a process or anything like that. The last I'd heard was that all the residents that had come in here, and I believe you made that statement at one of the meetings that I was at, all the residents that had come in prior to January of this year, maybe it was December of this year, were not going to be forced out. They would go through a process. Mm-hmm. We came in on the 25th or 22nd of January. So that's after the point. But you just indicated that anybody that's here now would not be forced out, that we would be asked and we would agree. That's all I'm saying. Is there something coming out that states that? Formally.
Let me take that under advisement. Certainly the incumbent residents, we sort of point to the contract. for that on what we're doing. Let me take that under advisement, okay? And to see what kind of clarity may or may not need to be. But I take your point. Yes.
Right now, we have about 500 people, more or less, a little less. Some are in independent and some are assisted care. What target population are you trying to get to? Do you want to have Falcons Landing of 800? What's the target?
There is no specific targeted number of population. What counts is occupancy and then the cash flow dynamics of the organization. Are we, if we're at full occupancy, if we got reasonable fees, like for instance, if we build, the memory care unit, and then how is that levied in with everything else that we're trying to do? Does the, the terrace homes right now we believe would be at least cover themselves. We're being conservative in saying they'd provide a net input to the community over what they would be. So it's all the puts and takes that go in, but two things, occupancy and financial strength. So we're not trying to build saying, okay, we are targeting to get to 835 people, and that's the magic number, and we're going to, and that will make us a resounding success. That's not the targeted objective.
I guess I'm thinking that we have 500 now, and generally our facilities, the swimming pool and the feeding facilities and so on, they're pretty well full. How many more people can these existing facilities accommodate?
That's, when I mentioned about part of the analysis that goes in. Right now, phase one is pretty minimal number of people in, on the order of, 24 at most. And I don't have that number with me right now. But it's reasonably, a reasonably small number. That being said, that doesn't mean we give the management team and the designers and the architects a pass by going, okay, it's relatively small, okay, wink, nod, we can absorb it, move on. Those are the things that the architects, the planners, the management team, okay, we bring these people in, where do they fit? Do they, does it all come about? So that's part of the analysis that's going to be required for what we're doing. We're not giving any number a pass, and we're not saying, hey, once we get to a certain number, then we'll start looking at it. Any incremental change here is going to be occurring that. Keep in mind, right now, with phase one, if we execute as planned, there is a number of residences go away, a number of residents come in. So it's a net gain, but maybe not as many as you think. It's not like we're going to have all of a sudden 50, 80, 100 people from a new phase one. A question over here.
Yes, sir. If in phase one, for example, current occupants of the buildings that would be affected are between the ages of 75 and 80 and choose not to move, what do you expect the delay to have, the impact of that delay, which could be 10 or 15 years?
We're going to have to assess that one person, one individual at a time. I frankly don't want to speculate that, because what I'm hoping is that people are reasonable, and that when we talk, we gauge, when you actually come, what I found when I was a detailer, what I found is when you actually talk to people and said, okay, here are the alternatives and the options, things became a lot clearer as far as what's really important to you and what we can do to address those, what can help. What are your most fundamental concerns in trying to address that? But I'm here to say right now that if somebody sits and says, I am absolutely not moving, then they're not moving.
The CEO of United, said that the maximum was $1,000. It's now been raised to $10,000. So you might have to consider likewise.
Thanks for your comment. So I go back to this then.
The firm that did the concept drawings of the memory unit and the garden-type apartments, in this process of looking at the total concept, was any changes to West Falls considered?
You know, I've got a short answer, yes.
Okay.
When in last fall, I put out a Q&A, and I don't want to read it out here. If you don't have a copy, we can send you another copy. But in there, you know, I asked for a summary of, you know, a very short, brief summary of options and principal issues, which included top of the Johnson Center, moving behind where it is, over West Falls, maybe building on the wetlands, you know, various other things. So there is a short soundbite of discussions about each of those, what was considered, and some of the principal issues. You know, like for instance, some of those is, you know, to avoid duplication of facilities and added costs, you try to keep something like that near the core of the community. You know, various other things like that. Now, one of the things I do intend to do with the, once we get, you know, approval and go past the Board of Supervisors is have, you know, we have detailed planning yet to be done. And certainly, you know, I've had a fair amount of turnover with the board, as well as, you know, it's been a while with the community, is certainly going to have them come down and they're going to talk to the board, and I'm also make sure they're going to present to the community over what the options were considered, why, what's the challenges. I mean, you know, there's, it's interesting. One of the litany of, you know, this sheet here, just a very short précis, which is Falcons Landing site constraints and design limitations. And that includes anything from utilities easements, wetlands. They've increased any changes have to meet current Loudoun County requirements. So they increased setback requirements from 50 feet to 75 feet from, you know, any construction along a fence line. I mean, there's a whole slew of things which, you know, if you want, like putting a jigsaw puzzle together, it kind of only goes together a couple of different ways. So I will certainly say it's been considered. I will certainly say that it's my intent to have them come back once we get past this, to have them come back, make a presentation so you can ask all these questions. You know, like the Johnson Center, one of the things is, hey, can't withstand, you can't build another floor on top of it. The construction and the architecture won't sustain the weight. So, I mean, there's a whole slew of things, and I certainly intend to bring them back and give you your opportunity to ask your, you know, when you're back in the room and saying, I don't understand why the board is not considering X or Y or Z. I certainly tend to do that. I'm not sure if I answered your question,
Yes,
but
you
that's
did.
certainly the intent. Any other questions? I know there must be more.
Well, I got it.
Okay. Oh, let's do up here first, and then get Mick Trainer.
Got a big map. Here. Okay, I understood you to say this afternoon that nobody would be forced out of their home. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Why in the hell didn't you say that months ago and save all this heartache?
Well, the reason is we were trying to figure out what our options were. I'll be perfectly frank with you. I didn't know whether we couldn't, you know, and I didn't want to say something and then backtrack on it. That'd be the worst thing I could possibly do, you know. And like I said, my public relations skills are defined by my skills that you've seen in the past year. So I probably would have saved a lot of heartburn. For that, I apologize. But be perfectly frank, you know, when you're trying to figure things out, you don't want to move so quickly. You make a rash decision. What are the options? What can we, you know, what's in the art of the possible, what's not, so that's frankly my answer. And it may not be very satisfying, but like I said, I'm telling you here today, I'm here to be truthful with you on that, and that may have saved me a few scars, but, hey, lesson learned. Mick Trainer.
Bill, I think I speak for all the residents when I thank you for being. Can you hear me?
Yeah, no, we can.
Okay. I think I speak for all of the residents when I thank you for coming here. I think we've lost it.
It's working again. Yeah, not now.
Working.
Please don't put down here, just think.
Got another territory here. I'm part of the loyal opposition. And, but I wanted to know that I support the Memory House, and I also support modernization. But as I mentioned a year ago, when all this arose, and I want to go on record as being in opposition, my reasons now are basically the same as I stated a year ago. I felt that the master plan planning was flawed, and there were flawed assumptions. There were a lack of alternative options studied. There was just one option that was presented to us. And as near as I can gather, the expert advice that you have had is limited to architects and engineers who would have a vested interest, I suppose. What I'm recommending is that there be a pause and the engagement of an outside marketing company that does this sort of thing, and have them do an analysis of what modernization and marketing steps could be taken here at Falcons Landing to keep us as a superior CCRC.
Thanks for your comments, Mick, and I appreciate that that you came today, and that I appreciate that that most in the community here appreciate about the board members, particularly my other two compatriots, came out. I'm not willing to commit to that yet. Doing another study. It's just very painful, but I will say that the board is doing reasonable engagement questions, and our architect has to answer questions as well in what we're doing. So there's another question over here.
I just want to talk for a few minutes about this issue of tax exemption. Both Dave Belden and I came to the resident in September on this particular. I've set up 2 tax-exempt foundations. I've been in tax-exempt foundation business for 40 years. Dave, I think, for 60 years. We are I'm going to use a term, then forget it, 501c3 tax-exempt organization. And because we don't have to pay state and federal taxes. It wasn't easy to do that. I know from the ones that I've set up, and I know from just talking to some of the founding fathers when we first came here, how hard that is. The second part of that is, because we are that, anybody who donates to us is able to take a tax break on their own tax forms. Thirdly, because the founding fathers went to Loudoun County and argued it, and by the way, we shouldn't have to pay Loudoun County taxes either, and they won. When Dave and I came to the Residents' Council, we started to see what was happening here, and there's great issues on both sides. I'm not on either side when I'm talking to this issue, but if we could just keep this inside the gate, if we find people like whoever that was you were reading from that said, let's take their tax exemption away. Hey, that reads good on people on the outside. Who the hell are they? We can, our taxes will go down if they pay taxes. be careful, ladies and gentlemen, with this issue, because we don't want to lose that. I don't know what Hardy probably knows, but we could be looking at a very substantial raise of what we'd have to pay if we didn't have the tax exemption. Thank you.
Thanks very much on that. I do want to point out two things about what your finance committee under Warren and Hardy have been doing for you. One, there was last year there was our certificate of public need expired, which basically meant that we were no longer able to bring in people from outside the community into our health care and with contract holders alone. We estimated that was a $1.4 million per year impact. And just to give you perspective, $1 million a year, if that's got to be coughed up by the residents, that's about a 5% increase in your residence fees. So that was a $1.4 million hit. Warren and her team, we engaged attorneys, went and did battle, went and appeals, and finally got that rescinded. So that was a $1.3 million impact to our plus. And the other thing I just want to acknowledge that you may or may not be aware of is, Hardy worked with various banks, did some refinancing of a significant amount of our loans out to 2030, got a 2.05 interest rate, and so it's the net change in his projections is about $6 million over that time of interest saved. So, there's nobody on the finance committee that will just say, "Hey, there's an added expense. We'll just toss it at the residents. They'll keep paying." There's active search for what's going on, but for every $1 million that comes up, that's an added cost that we can't avoid. That's 5% increase in fees if we had to go that route. If you want to look at it, that's about 20 FTEs if we had to let people go. And that's 20 people that work to make your life more comfortable. I think I have time for one more question, and then what I'd like to do, this gentleman here, and then what I'll do is adjourn the meeting, and then I'm more than happy to stay and take your questions individually. Steve, I'm not sure whether you're able to for a while. Lauren, unfortunately, has to depart. So, but we'll do that. Last question, sir.
Yes. One of the first features of this. What?
Yeah.
One.
You got to hold it real close, I think.
Better? Is that better? Well, one of the features of this plan, one of the first things, is the construction of the memory center. And of course, there will be a couple of housing units go out with the construction of the memory center. Now, if we do not get any further revenue from additional housing units after the cost of constructing and operating the medical center, but if we have no additional housing units, can you tell us what will be the impact on our average monthly fees?
Okay, there's a number of qualifiers to my answer here. One, we do not have real detailed cost construction estimates. It's pretty broad. And some numbers I've seen are $6 million, others I've seen $12 million. And it all depends on, hey, have you put in contingency money in there? What conservatism you put in? You put in basements, So there's a number of factors that go in. Assuming some of the, let's say it's on the more expensive side. So what the pluses are, you get revenue from the residents. You get additional revenue from anybody that we bring in from outside the community. And it would be significantly more cost neutral if we only had people from the outside paying those rates come in. But then why build it? You know, if we built it only to make it a net neutral cash flow by bringing in outside people, I wouldn't. That's not is not reasonable. So it would be a net negative. So the gain is the revenue from those sources. The expenses are, or the changes, the loss of the expense money, or the duplex and the single family home, Bill Magoo's bulldozer home. That would be the loss of that revenue. We have staffing expenses, and as you might imagine with a memory unit, the staffing expenses are not insignificant and considerable. So what I'm trying to say is ballpark, and if you say, hey, Bill, you told me that number and it's not that later, I'm going to say you're probably right. So what I'm going to say is maybe on the order of $500,000 to $1 million deficit per year is our initial first cut estimate. But like I said, we haven't got detailed construction estimates. We haven't said specifically how many individual units there will be, what's detailed staffing plan. So we don't have all those. But just from a gross thumb rule point of view, because we have to, obviously we have to borrow to put some of put the construction together. So I would say on the order of that. And like you said, my thumb rule is if you have to come up with $1 million, you have to come up with it somewhere. And if you just got it from ongoing monthly fees, that would be about 5%. If you cut staff, you did various other things, maybe could ameliorate it, but that affects you. If we cut back our capital improvements, if we delay repairing roofs or air conditioning units, or put it on a long, there's all these variable things which have puts and takes that go on in here. Hopefully that order gives you an idea of order of magnitude, and probably the best thing I can do is guarantee you that's not the right number, okay? And, but at least that gives you a concept. I'm not talking, hey, you're gonna, your rate's gonna be raised 50%, and I'm not gonna say, hey, oh, by the way, this is self-funding, and so don't worry about it. So it's somewhere between there. Thanks very much for coming today. I very much appreciate it. And Steve Plummer and I will be up here and be able to answer questions.